Okay, we've got the Avios 1200mm Sea Fury out today, out for its maiden flight. A couple of changes I've made on it. As usual, there's always something to change. I've extended the hatch. That normally stops here, because when you put a battery in, it's right at the front and it's totally enclosed. You can't get to it, you can't put a strap on. So I modified that. Had to put a little tongue on, some guide plates to center the hatch on properly. It's meant to use a 3000 milliamp 4S. I'm using 4400. It only just balances with this 4400. I've cut out the pilot section, which can be put back on. It weighs quite a bit, and because the weight is behind, I can't balance it if he's in there, so I'm working on what I'm going to do about that. Now, fitting everything in here. Now the hatch doesn't fit, it moves side to side, the fuselage is a bit bulged. That's pretty well, they all come like that for some reason. I didn't bother fixing it. I've got to put a locator so the hatch centers better, but I forgot. The main other thing I did, the wheels as it comes are quite small. They're 57mm. These are 66mm from FMS 1400s aircraft. So number one, they'll handle ground better, but it's mainly because they looked a bit weird, and you need some forward rake on all warbirds, and these are the same, so you have to bend these legs forward. So while you're doing it all, you can just Dremel out the wheel wells so they fit in. There's a little bit of geometry, mucking around with bends and things you have to do. Part of the wheel has to rotate in a bit to actually fit. That means when it comes out it's got a bit of toe in, but that's good for ground handling. Anyway, I put longer servo arms on the door so they open a bit wider and then still close. Landing gear deployed. Landing gear retracted. So with a bit of work on calculation of angles, bending the legs better, everything operates as normal again. It would have been nice if they had sprung oleos on them, because it's a very heavy plane. It's 2.65 kilograms all up with the battery in it. A typical 1200 stock like a Dynam is about 1.4 kilograms, and even if you make mods or whatever, you'll end up at 1.9 to 2. And they're 1250mm wingspans, and at 1200 wingspan to have 2.65 kilogram is a lot of wing loading, so it's not going to be a forgiving plane if something goes wrong. So you really need to take care and fly it properly like a real plane. Now, so we did all the power checks. I can't remember the numbers, checked it all at home. The propeller's balanced. All the throws, I've set them up as per the high rate on the, I've got triple rates. My mid rate is the high rate they suggest. My low rates are their low rate, and my high rate is even higher, just in case I might need it for some reason. So we're pretty well ready to go. This field isn't too bad. It's a bit bumpy, undulating. I think it should be right with the landing gear the way it is. So we'll see how it flies. Hopefully it doesn't do anything bizarre and not fly. Birds on the runway, that's alright. I think I'm going to go to high rate elevator. I don't like the look of the small amount. Have to turn left because the wind's coming from the left. And we're airborne. We'll just get it slightly trimmed before we put the gear up. Got a bit of right roll still. What are we flying at? About 2/3 throttle, whatever that means. Needs a bit of left trim, a little bit of... well, I put it onto my high rate and it needs the high rate. It's very docile. So now we can put the gear in.
Landing gear retracted.
I'll turn the telemetry on and see if we can get some numbers out of it.
21 amps, 602 mAh, 15.2 volts.
So that's 21 amps.
19.1 amps, 658 mAh, 15.2 volts. 24.8 amps, 702 mAh, 15.1 volts. 18.3
The lights, you can see the lights quite well. Well, when it's close.
Volts, 3 minutes. 20.9 amps.
So that's basically flying around at 20 amps, which is not a bad scale looking speed.
23.5 amps, 840 mAh.
It's a very grey plane and it's a bit of a grey sky day.
19.6 amps, 887
So
mAh,
needs some
15.1 volts. 24.7 amps, 939 mAh, 15 volts. 23.4 amps, 988 mAh, 15 volts. 16.8 amps,
I have to say,
31 mAh, 15.
it flies really well. I've always liked heavier planes. I thought this was heavier than I would normally like, but it actually flies perfectly fine in a scale manner.
23.7 amps, 1126 mAh, 14.9 volts. 17.9 amps, 1172
Four-blade
mAh,
propeller
15 volts.
gives it at least a bit of a
21.4
bit of sound rather than just the whir of electric. Not much.
Volts. 23 amps, 1265 mAh, 14.8 volts. 27.8 amps, 1323 mAh, 14.7 volts. 23.7 amps, 1386 mAh, 14.7 volts.
Well, it only runs, what,
28.7
28 amps at full power,
41 mAh, 14.6
which sounds
volts.
lowish to me, but
21.4 amps, 1487 mAh, 14.8 volts, 1 minute. 25.6 amps, 1500
very docile roll with those rates.
volts. 26.8 amps,
Dead. We'll give it high rates on ailerons and see what happens.
14.6 volts. Aileron, high rate. 21.9 amps, 1652
Well, high rate's probably pretty good, maybe a tiny bit too much, or my high rate, but their recommended numbers are good for scale, but very slow roll rate, and you'd be doing a very long slow roll.
23.5 amps, 1813 mAh, 14.6 volts. 27.3 amps, 1870 mAh, 14.5 volts. 24.9 amps, 1920 mAh, 14.5 volts. 18.8 amps, 1972 mAh, 14.6 volts. 24.1 amps, 2023 mAh, 14.5 volts. 22.9 amps, 2070 mAh, 14.5 volts.
I probably got too much elevator
19.9 amps,
pro.
2123 mAh, 14.5 volts.
The plane's got this
amps,
quite heavy, as I said, so it'll have a lot of inertia.
14.5
Very
volts.
likely if you reefed on up elevator to maximum, you'd be able to pitch it up so sharply you'd get an accelerated stall. So it's sort of it's not doing it, not attempting to do it much at all, so it's alright, but I'm sure you'll be able to do it, and it'll be a danger if you were a bit more zealous flying around. It's something you'd have to watch out for.
14.4 volts. 19.3 amps, 2368 mAh, 14.5 volts. 24.5 amps, 2417 mAh, 14.4 volts.
I suppose get the landing gear out and test what it does with landing gear out and flaps, etc.
21.3 amps, 2517 mAh, 14.4 volts. Landing gear deployed. 21.8 amps, 2566
I'm going to go to their
14.4
recommended high rate level
elevator
to just
normal rate. 21.7 amps,
make it a bit more docile for landing.
mAh, 14.4 volts. 22.8 amps, 2660 mAh, 14.4 volts.
As I come around, we'll put the flaps down. That's the low rate, which is really a takeoff flap.
22.8 amps, 2766 mAh, 14.3 volts.
Followed by, well, I don't know really want to use, I'll put full flaps out just to see. Definitely makes it climb a lot, so we'll leave them in for the moment, and I think I'll land it under low flaps just to see how that goes and what slowing down I might need otherwise.
929 mAh, 14.2 volts. 2 amps,
It's going to come in pretty fast, really. It's going to go a long way.
14.6 volts. 0.2 amps, 2000.
I'm going to go to high rate speed to get maximum up elevator for ground handling, so we'll see if we can keep it off any nose overs.
966 mAh, 14.5 volts. 9 amps, 2988 mAh.
Oh, it's not even, it's not lifting the tail on any bump so far.
9.3 amps.
And I haven't even put the flaps up. I really should put the flaps back up. There we go. Because if you have your flaps down, that just gives an extra bit of nose down capability from the airflow that goes under them. So it's actually taxiing very good. Like you can see, the tail isn't even attempting to lift on any bumps. So the ground handling is actually excellent with those wheels. I don't know what it'll be like with the stock wheels, which are smaller.
1.3 amps, 3146 mAh, 14.5 volts.
So that was the maiden flight of the Sea Fury. I actually like the inertias of it, so the weight actually does suit it very well, surprisingly to me. The landing gears worked out excellent. I was going to buy some Dubro low bounce tyres, which probably still wouldn't be a bad thing to have that extra bit of cushioning, but on this sort of grass, the FMS, which are quite, they're not hard, but they're more towards hard than even medium in their well, softness. So whilst they are all working fine, probably couldn't hurt that the Dubros. I'm going to think about, I was going to buy them today, but I'm just not sure if I really need them. Yeah, nothing else. The flaps, I've got to test that landing came in a little bit fast. I could have slowed it down more, really, myself. But if I would have used full flaps, because that's quite an angle. I'm only using about 25 degrees on low flaps. Full flaps, something like 70 degrees or more. That would be quite a bit of drag and would help a lot for the landing process. So I'll do that next flight. That's about it. It's a very, very well made plane, very nice looking, and as it turns out, flies very well too. Post flight of the Sea Fury, the battery came down very lightly warm. I was only flying around very slow scale like anyway, but yeah, the battery basically doesn't even know it's been used. So what we'll do, we'll check it out. Not sure what I flew it down to. Oh, right on 3.7, 3.67. Now, from all my testing, there's no problem going even down to 3.6 on a battery, as long as the load is very low. Such as this case, if the heat will tell you what the battery cares about. That is so faintly warm, it's not even going to care about 3.69, it's not going to damage it all. So anyway, it's probably a little bit long. It had used 3,155 milliamps, even though their current meters and stuff you have in telemetry and planes is not highly accurate, so it could be 1 or 200 error. Maximum current it ever saw was 45 amps. I'm not even sure when that was, because when I went to full power later on it was 28. I think it was 28 amps. Oh. Lowest voltage is 14.1, so who knows when that was and what I was doing. Probably under when I was at full power, I would imagine. Gee, maximum power ever was 239 watts. 14.5 volts roughly. 28 amps. That doesn't look right to me. I'm thinking the power would have been more like 300 to 350 when it was at watt, because it was using 28 amps. The voltage would have dropped to maybe 14.2 or something at that time. That's roughly 1.5 times 28, which is 280 and 14, even close to 400 watts. So I'm not really sure what they're doing in their maths. And that's the battery info on the Sea Fury.